Okay. A.G. Hogan, I'm going to zip over you quickly. I just want to follow up. There's a report in the paper the other day, CRA clawed back $458 million in pandemic-era wage subsidies. This goes back to your report where you were showing, I think it was at the low side, your report, it said $27 billion in ineligible subsidies and payouts. I'm wondering, have you reconciled this at all with CRA? Is CRA still sticking to their guns that it's a much smaller amount as has been reported, or do you still believe that it is, as has been told to this committee, $27 billion in improper payments is on the low side?
So in our report on the COVID benefit programs, we identified that $4.6 billion had been paid to ineligible individuals, and that should be followed up. The $27.4 billion were potentially ineligible to both businesses and individuals. About $15 billion of that related to wage subsidies to businesses. The report that the Canada Revenue Agency recently released following up on some of their post-payment work, as I mentioned previously, I really focused in on what was linked to our work, and I felt it was potentially misleading for a reader. The Canada Revenue Agency commented that they had followed up on 53% of the businesses that we had identified in our $15 billion of potentially ineligible payments, but the majority of those were not done through post-payment work. And so my concern
that is your
remains.
time, Mr. McCauley, but I'll be back to you on
So one of the issues you have brought up, and I address this to the Auditor General, it's an important issue to me and to the people whom I represent, is the COVID-19 support amounts. You mentioned it in your opening remarks and in your comments here, and you mentioned that one of the most important things here is that the government should do everything it can to go and claw back the excess amounts. We learned this week that the Canada Revenue Agency had announced or has announced that it will not carry out the necessary checks for at least 24,000 cases that had been earmarked that might have been overpaid. Do you maintain that it is important, as you say here, to claw back these amounts to ensure that the budget be better balanced, or do you think differently at this point? I did read the short report that was produced by CRA earlier this week, and I focused on the comments related to our work on our performance study about these amounts. I agree that the amounts may be somewhat disappointing. CRA mentioned that they have audited 53% of the companies, the businesses that they had identified. But looking into the details, only 4% of them were audited using payment audits. The others were audits prior to payment. So if you remember my report, my recommendations were truly focused on the fact that this was not rigorous enough, not enough work had been done in examining at the post-payment level, and I still maintain this opinion. I'm very concerned by the fact that the government is using a standard approach, what you would usually do in a situation that's not at all standard, and they should carry out far more post-payment verifications to ensure that the amounts that were paid out to businesses or to taxpayers who were not eligible for these, occurred and should be clawed back. Very interesting, Auditor General. Let me now speak to the Deputy Minister, Department of Finance, because he is the one who examines these portfolios in detail. Considering the billions that may have been overpaid to individuals, and keep in mind that the business accounts, business support accounts during COVID, which were used to help the great number of businesses that thought they would go under, you'd say, look, this is imbalanced. We're not going to claw back what was an overpayment, but yet we're quite happy to reimburse loans or demand reimbursement of loans before companies are able to do this. Have you studied this matter, this imbalance? Thank you for the question. If I look at both sides of that medal, to one side, the activities of CRA, I do know that they are trying to look further into the overpayments, the situations where they did overpay people. They do have an audit process, and they're trying to make good use of it. Yes, but we've just heard now that this was a standard process. This is a standard process, and as I say, this is not a, typical standard situation. These were amounts paid out during COVID, and they're overpayments, and one would expect that the CRA carry out audits that are appropriate to this non-standard situation. We know that in some cases these were outright frauds. People have defrauded our government. So why at the Department of Finance aren't we saying, look, let's put extra effort on this rather than saying, we'll just turn down this report of 5% for the CEBA, that's what we need to look at. Cutting this at the right time was not carried out, and we haven't looked into what was overpaid. I can't speak for the Department of Finance or to the cases they're following up on, but I'm sure that they're applying an overall risk approach about the overpayments and perhaps the underpayments of taxes, for example. And they do have a team at the Auditor's Office that is making decisions about which cases they will examine in depth with a view to fraud or overpayment. So I'm ready to bow to their level of expertise. I'm sure they're choosing to focus on the most important cases. Thank you very much.